So this is the big moment, guys. We are putting together the 2013 gaming PC budget build. Starting off, let's get into it. We're going to put my intake fans in, and we're going to put those into the front. So we want to start by taking off both sides. So your main side and then the back side where all your cables will end up, for my case at least. So we're going to take those off. Now, for most cases, I need to get into the front. So most cases you can grab like at the bottom and pull it off. So just be gentle with that and pull it out and set that to the side. Now, figuring out which way the air is going to pull and push air. Once you get that figured out, go ahead and put that into your case. I'm going to be putting two in, so we're going to do the first one. Now, pull the cable through the other side and just set that down. And then using the supplied screws with the fan, you're going to want to screw them in. And then just repeat the process with your second fan, put it in, pull the cable through, and screw. Now that you have both fans put back in, you can take the front of your case and pop it back on. Just be careful not to pinch any cables that may be going from the front panel into the case. Now for the next part, I've chosen to put in the hard drive. So this is tools design, so you just twist and pull. Place your hard drive or the hard drive caddy, as I'm using, into the case. Put your retainer back in and twist it and lock it back in place. I have a little bit of trouble. Now this is optional. You can turn the case around and add two screws into the other side to secure it better. Now we're going to be installing the power supply. So you're just going to pick it up and set it in your case like so. And then from the back, you're going to line up all the holes and screw it in place with the supplied screws. Now what I've done is I've taken all my cables, as you can see, and I've pushed them into the back of the case to get all the cables out of the way, and we will move them into the appropriate place later on in the build. Here's a behind view of the other side of the case where all my cable management is. The next step will be to install the CPU into the socket on the motherboard. Now, looking at the motherboard, what you want to do is pop off that retainer. Just be careful not to damage any of the pins under it, and loosen the retention arm that is right next to it. And pull back the little flap that'll hold the CPU down. Now, looking at your CPU, when you pull it out, there's only one way it can go in. There should be two little notches towards the front of it, and you just want to make sure that you set it down, even pressure into the CPU socket on the motherboard, like so. Now, push your little flap back over on top of it, and use your retention spring to push it down. Now, make sure that the actual glove, as I guess I'll call it, that goes on top of the CPU is actually in contact with the CPU. Like you saw, I kind of missed it and it wasn't actually pushing down on it. So once the CPU is down on there, you need to apply your heat sink. I'll just be using the stock heat sink, so you want to, with the thermal paste on it, just set it down evenly on top. And with this fan, it's just going to be these little push tabs. So just push one, push the opposite end down on it. Two, do the other one, three, and end with the fourth one. And that is it. The thermal paste will evenly spread out onto the CPU and work fine. Now take the CPU fan and plug it into the header, which is right next to the CPU socket, like so. Make sure you get all 4 pins. I believe mine has 4 pins on it. Make sure you get them all in and you don't bend one as you're plugging it in. The next step is to install the RAM, which my board has 4 slots, and I'll be installing it into the A1 slot closest to the CPU. Make sure you look at your RAM stick and you line up the little notch that's kind of off center on the RAM and line it up with the port on your board. Apply even pressure to push it down into the slot until it just kind of like snaps in place. The most common thing for a motherboard to not start up, or a computer, is that the RAM is not inserted all the way. If you're using 2 sticks, make sure you do it in A1 and A2 for dual channel link. Now we're going to come back to our case and put our backplate in for our motherboard input and output plugs. and just pop that in place. Now we're going to set the computer case on its side, and we're going to place the motherboard in the case. Be sure to set it down on top of the screw standoffs, which I've installed previously. Some cases the standoffs are already installed for your specific motherboard size. But just be sure to put the motherboard down gently and make sure it touches the contacts of the screw holes on your motherboard. You want to make sure that the standoffs do not touch anything but those screw holes, because screw holes are grounded, and so you don't want the motherboard shorting out because the standoff is touching somewhere else on the board. Now we're going to install the graphics card. Unless you have a really old graphics card, most graphics cards nowadays take up 2 PCI ports. So I'm going to remove 2 PCI plates from my computer case. And when bringing in your graphics card, make sure you apply even pressure so that you don't break a contact, or so that you don't have a loose contact with your graphics card. Now we're going to reapply the screws that we removed earlier to finish securing the card in place. And we're going to apply our 2 PCI Express power cords to give power to our supply. We are now done with the assembly of the hardware. The only thing left to do is turn on the power button and see if we get a post in the BIOS screen. A couple of things I left off where you do need to make sure that your motherboard power is plugged in, as well as your CPU power. I kind of skimped on that part in the video. So as you can see, our BIOS did come up, and the BIOS for this motherboard is up and running. So the only thing left for me to do is make sure I set the boot process to install Windows. I will be installing Windows 8, as you can see here, and I will be installing it through a flash drive. So in my BIOS, I went and I set that a USB drive will be the first boot order in it. If you're installing off a CD or DVD, then you need to make sure your disk drive is set as the first boot order in your BIOS. And then after Windows is done installing, you can just go back into your BIOS and change it back to your main hard drive. So once Windows is installing, you can just set it down and leave for a little while. It took me about 20 minutes to install Windows 8 through a thumb drive. But once Windows is installed and you're at your desktop or your start screen, make sure you install the drivers that came on your DVD with the motherboard. You can do that, or I went to the manufacturer website and installed the most recent updates. And once you do that, you need to make sure you install all the Windows updates that are through the Windows Updater, and set up a firewall and a virus system, because Windows are not immune to everything. There are going to be viruses out there, so make sure you set up a proper firewall to prevent your computer getting messed up. So this build is done. I have successfully installed Windows 8 onto this computer. At the time of this video, Windows 8.1 is actually already out for purchase, or if you already have Windows 8, it's a free update. I do apologize for the amount of time it took me to upload this video. School just got a hold of me and it was really crazy. But for $750, I have made an incredible gaming machine. I can run all my games on ultra settings at 1080p with my new 1080p monitor, which you can see in my last video here. And overall, it's been a really fun experience building this computer. So as always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.